Hey squirrel, sorry my lights are off and it's doing that pulsing thing. My overhead light looks like 2 bulbs went out of 3. All my light bulbs are popping lately. Crazy. Not popping, just going out. Chapter 8, A Tommy and Tuppence Mystery by the Pricking of My Thumbs by Agatha Christie. Chapter 8 is called Sutton Chancellor. After leaving the canal house, Tuppence drove slowly on along the narrow winding road which she had been assured would lead her to the village of Sutton Chancellor. It was an isolated road. There were no houses to be seen from it, only field gates from which muddy tracks led inward. There was little traffic. One tractor came along, and one lorry proudly announcing that it carried Mother's Delight and the picture of an enormous and unnatural-looking loaf. The church steeple she had noticed in the distance seemed to have disappeared entirely, but it finally reappeared quite near at hand after the lane had bent suddenly and sharply round a belt of trees. Forgot to reapply the lipstick. That's all right. Y'all just listen. This is a mess. Tuppence glanced at the speedometer and saw she had come 2 miles since the canal house. It was an attractive old church standing in a sizable churchyard with a lone yew, Y-E-W, tree standing by the church door. Tuppence left the car outside the Lich Gate, L-Y-C-H, passed through it and stood for a few moments surveying the church and the churchyard round it. Then she went to the church door with its rounded Norman arch and lifted the heavy handle. It was unlocked and she went inside. The inside was unattractive. The church was an old one, undoubtedly, but it had had a zealous wash and brush up in Victorian times. Its pitch pine pews, say that 3 times fast, and its flaring red and blue glass windows had ruined any antique charm it had once possessed. A middle-aged woman in a tweed coat and skirt was arranging flowers in brass vases round the pulpit. She had already finished the altar. She looked round at Tuppence with a sharply inquiring glance. Tuppence wandered up an aisle looking at the memorial tablets on the walls. A family called Warrender seemed to be the most fully represented in early years. All the priority, Sutton Chancellor, Captain Warrender, Major Warrender, Sarah Elizabeth Warrender, dearly beloved wife of George Warrender. A new tablet recorded the death of Julia Stark, another beloved wife of Philip Stark, also of the Priory, Priory. Sutton Chancellor, so it would seem the Warrenders had died out. None of them were particularly suggestive or interesting. Tuppence passed out of the church again and walked round it on the outside. The outside, Tuppence thought, was much more attractive than the inside. Early perp and deck, said Tuppence to herself, having been brought up on familiar terms with ecclesiastical architecture. She was not particularly fond of an early perp herself. It was a fair-sized church, and she thought that the village of Sutton Chancellor must once have been a rather more important center of rural life than it was now. She left the car where it was and walked on to the village. It had a village shop and a post office and about a dozen small houses or cottages. 1 or 2 of them were thatched, but the others were rather plain and unattractive. There were 6 council houses at the end of the village street, looking slightly self-conscious. A brass plate on a door announced Arthur Thomas Chimney Sweep. Tuppence wondered if any responsible house agents were likely to engage his services for the house by the canal, which certainly needed them. How silly she had been, she thought, not to have asked the name of the house. She walked back slowly towards the church in her car, pausing to examine the churchyard more closely. She liked the churchyard. There were very few new burials in it. Most of the stones commemorated Victorian burials, and earlier ones, half defaced by lichen and time. The old stones were attractive. Some of them were upright slabs with cherubs on the tops, with wreaths around them. She wandered about, looking at the inscriptions. Warrenders again. Mary Warrender, age 47. Alice Warrender, age 33. Colonel George Warrender, killed in Afghanistan. Various infant Warrenders, deeply regretted, and eloquent verses of pious hopes. She wondered if any Warrenders lived here still. They left off being buried here, apparently. She couldn't find any tombstones later than 1843. Rounding the big yew tree, she came upon an elderly clergyman who was stooping over a row of old tombstones near a wall behind the church. He straightened up and turned round as Tuppence approached. "Good afternoon," he said pleasantly. "Good afternoon," said Tuppence, and added, "I've been looking at the church." "Ruined by Victorian renovation," said the clergyman. She had thought. He had a pleasant voice and nice smile. He looked about 70, but Tuppence presumed he was not quite as far advanced in age as that, though he was certainly rheumatic and rather unsteady on his legs. Stern sinus mess, throat sore. "Too much money about in Victorian times," he said sadly. "Too many ironmasters. They were pious, but had unfortunately no sense of the artistic, no taste. Did you see the east window?" He shuddered. "Yes," said Tuppence. "Dreadful." "I couldn't agree with you more. I'm the vicar," he added, rather unnecessarily. "I thought you must be," said Tuppence politely. "Have you been here long?" she added. 10 years, my dear," he said. "It's a nice parish, nice people, what there are of them. I've been very happy here. They don't like my sermons very much," he added sadly. "I do the best I can, but of course I can't pretend to be really modern. Sit down," he added hospitably, waving to a nearby tombstone. Tuppence sat down gratefully, and the vicar took a seat on another one nearby. "I can't stand very long," he said apologetically. He added, "Can I do anything for you, or are you just passing by?" "Well, I'm really just passing by," said Tuppence. "I thought I'd just look at the church. I'd rather lost myself in a car wandering round the lanes." Yes, very difficult to find one's way round here. A lot of signposts are broken, you know, and the council don't repair them as they should." He added, "I don't know that it matters very much. People who drive down these lanes aren't usually trying to get anywhere in particular. People who are kept to the main roads. What was I just saying? Don't repair them. People who drive down there are usually trying to get... people who are trying to get somewhere. Dreadful," he added again, "especially the new motorway. At least I think so. The noise and the speed and the reckless driving. Oh, well. Pay no attention to me. I'm a crusty old fella. You never guess what I'm doing here," he went on. "I saw you were examining some of the gravestones," said Tuppence. "Has there been any vandalism? Have teenagers been breaking bits off them?" "No, one's mind does turn that way nowadays, with so many telephone boxes wrecked. and all those other things that these young vandals do. Poor children, they don't know any better, I suppose. Can't think of anything more amusing to do than to smash things. Sad, isn't it? Very sad. No, he said, there's been no damage of that kind here. The boys around here are a nice lot on the whole. No, I'm just looking for a child's grave. Tuppence stirred on her tombstone. A child's grave? She said. Yes, somebody wrote to me, a Major Waters. He asked if by any possibility a child had been buried here. I looked it up in the parish register, of course, but there was no record of any such name. All the same, I came out here and looked round the stones. I thought, that perhaps whoever wrote... Oh, come on. Whoever wrote might have got hold of some wrong name, or that there had been a mistake. What was the Christian name? Asked Tuppence. He didn't know. Perhaps Julia, after the mother. How old was the child? Again, he wasn't sure. Rather vague, the whole thing. I think myself that the man must have got hold of the wrong village altogether. I never remember a Waters living here or having heard of one. What about the Warrenders? Asked Tuppence, her mind going back to the names in the church. The church seems full of tablets to them, and their names are on lots of gravestones out here. Ah, that family's died out by now. They had fine property in old 14th century priory. Am I saying that right? Let me look it up. Oh, come on and look up the right word. It's capitalized. A small monastery or nunnery that is governed by a prior or prioress. Yeah, priory. Origin is Middle English from Anglo-Norman, blah, 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 blah. But the main thing is it's a monastery of men or women under religious vows and is headed by a prior or prioress. All right, it was burnt down, nearly 100 years ago now. So I suppose any Warrenders there were left went away and didn't come back. A new house was built on the site by a rich Victorian called Stark. A very ugly house, but comfortable, they say. Very comfortable. Bathrooms, and all that. I suppose that sort of thing is important. It seems a very odd thing, said Tuppence, that someone should write and ask you about a child's grave. Somebody, a relation? The father of the child, Lord help, said the vicar. One of these war tragedies, I imagine. A marriage that broke up when the husband was on service. Abroad, the young wife ran away with another man while the husband was serving abroad. There was a child he'd never seen. She'd be grown up by now, I suppose, if she were alive. It must be 20 years ago or more. Isn't it a long time after to be looking for her? Apparently, he only heard there was a child quite recently. The information came to him by pure chance. Curious story, the whole thing. What made him think that the child had been buried here? This thing makes the color look crazy. I gather somebody who had come across his wife in wartime had told him that his wife had said she was living at Sutton Chancellor. It happened, You meet someone, a friend or acquaintance you haven't seen for years, and they sometimes can give you news from the past that you wouldn't get any other way. But she's certainly not living here now. Nobody of that name has lived here, not since I've been here. or in the neighborhood as far as I know. Of course, the mother might have been going by another name. However, I gather the father is employing solicitors and inquiry agents and all that sort of thing. And they will probably be able to get results in the end. It will take time. Was it your poor child? Murmured Tuppence. I beg your pardon, my dear? Nothing, said Tuppence. Something somebody said to me the other day. Was it your poor child? It's rather a startling thing to hear suddenly, but I don't really think the old lady who said it knew what she was talking about. I know, I'm often the same. I say things and don't really know what I mean by them. Most vexing. I expect you know everything about the people who live here now, said Tuppence. Well, there certainly aren't very many to know. Yes, why? Is there someone you wanted to know about? I wondered if there had ever been a Mrs. Lancaster living here. Lancaster? No, I don't think recollect that name. And there's a house. I was driving today rather aimlessly, not minding particularly where I went, just following lanes. I know, very nice, the lanes around here, and you can find quite rare specimens. Botanical, I mean, in the hedges here. Nobody ever picks flowers in these hedges. We never get any tourists round here, or that sort of thing. Yes, I found some very rare specimens sometimes. Dusty crane's bell, for instance. There was a house by a canal, said Tuppence, refusing to be sidetracked into botany, near a little humpback bridge. It was about 2 miles from here. I wondered what its name was. Let me see. Canal, humpback bridge, well, there's several houses like that. There's Maricott Farm. It wasn't a farm. Now I expect it was the Perry's house. Amos and Alice Perry. That's right, said Tuppence, a Mr. and Mrs. Perry. She's a striking-looking woman, isn't she? Like a witch. Interesting, I always think. Very interesting. Medieval face. Didn't you think so? She's going to play the witch in our play we're getting up. The school children, you know. She looks rather like a witch, doesn't she? Yes, said Tuppence, a friendly witch. As you say, my dear, absolutely right. Yes, a friendly witch. But he, yes, poor fellow, said the vicar. Not completely compos mentis, but no harm in him. They were very nice. They asked me in for a cup of tea, said Tuppence, but what I wanted to know was the name of the house. I forgot to ask them. They're only living in half of it, aren't they? Yes, in what used to be the old kitchen and quarters. They call it Waterside, I think, though I believe the ancient name for it was Watermead, a pleasanter name, I think. Who does the other part of the house belong to? Well, the whole house used to belong originally to the Bradleys. That was a good many years ago, yes, 30 or 40 at least, I should think. And then it was sold, and then sold again, and then it remained empty for a long time. When I came here, it was just being used as a kind of weekend place by some actress, Miss Margrave, I believe. She was not here very much, just used to come down from time to time. I never knew her. She never came to church. I saw her in the distance sometimes. A beautiful creature, a very beautiful creature. Who does it actually belong to now? Tuppence reposed. No, Tuppence persisted. I've no idea. Possibly it still belongs to her. The part the Perrys live in is only rented to them. I recognized it, you know, said Tuppence, as soon as I saw it, because I've got a picture of it. Oh, really? That must have been one of the Boscoms. Or was it the name Boscobel? I can't remember now. Some name like that. I wouldn't remember the painting started with a B. Let's see. So he was a Cornishman, fairly well-known artist, I believe. I rather imagine he's dead now. Yes, he used to come down here fairly often. He used to sketch all around this part of the world. He did some oils here, too. Very attractive landscapes, some of them. This particular picture, said Tuppence, was given to an old aunt of mine who died about a month ago. It was given to her by... given to her. The picture was given to... Okay, it was given to her by Mrs. Lancaster. That's why I asked if you knew the name. But the vicar shook his head once more. Lancaster. No? I don't seem to remember that name. Ah, but here's the person you must ask. Our dear Miss Bly. Very active Miss Bly is. She knows all about the parish. She runs everything. The Women's Institute, the Boy Scouts, and the Guides. Everything. You just ask her. She's very active indeed. The vicar sighed. The activity of Miss Bly seemed to worry him. Nellie Bly, they call her in the village. The boys sing it after her sometimes. Nellie Bly. It's not her proper name, though. That's something more like Gertrude or Geraldine. Miss Bly, who was the tweed-clad woman Tuppence had seen in the church, was approaching them at a rapid trot. Still holding a small watering can, she eyed Tuppence with deep curiosity as she approached, increasing her pace and starting a conversation before she reached them. Finished my job, she exclaimed merrily. Had a bit of a rush today. Oh, yes, had a bit of a rush. Of course, in the morning. But today... we had the emergency meeting in the parish rooms, and really, you wouldn't believe the time it took. So much argument, you know. I really think sometimes people object to things just for the fun of doing so. Mrs. Partington was particularly irritating, wanting everything. Oh, I'm sorry, my nose always itching. Wanting everything fully discussed, you know, and wondering whether we'd got enough different prices from different farms. Different farms. Going to sleep, y'all. Trying to at least get through this page. Wanting everything fully discussed, you know, and wondering whether we'd gotten enough different prices from different firms. I mean, the whole thing is such a small cost anyway that really a few shillings here or there can't make much difference. And Birkenheads have always been most reliable. I don't think really, Vicar, you know, that you ought to sit on that tombstone. Irreverent, perhaps, suggested the vicar. Oh, no, of course I didn't mean that at all, Vicar. I meant the stone, you know, the damp does come through. And with your rheumatism, her eyes slid sideways to Tuppence questioningly. Let me introduce you to Miss Bly, said the vicar. This is, he hesitated. Mrs. Beersford, said Tuppence. Ah, yes, said Miss Bly. I saw you in the church, didn't I, just now, looking round it? I would have come and spoken to you, called your attention to one or two interesting points, but I was in such a hurry to finish my job. I ought to have come and helped you, said Tuppence in her sweetest voice, but it wouldn't have been much use, would it, because I could see you knew so exactly where every flower ought to go. Well, now, that's very nice of you to say so, but it is quite true. I've done the flowers in the church for, I don't know how many years it is. We let the school children arrange their own particular pots of wildflowers for festivals, though of course they haven't the least idea, poor little things. I do think a little instruction. But Mrs. Peake will never have any instructions. She's so particular. She says it spoils their initiative. Are you staying down here? She asked. She asked Tuppence. And I'm going to stop there. Yeah, there's quite a bit to go yet. And y'all know I was about to fall asleep a while ago. Just get quiet and go. Are you staying down here? She asked Tuppence. Okay. That's where we'll stop. And be sweet, don't be ugly. I'll see you later. Love y'all. Bye-bye.